on Money Talk 1010 AM. It's the Morgan Streetman Show. Morgan and Roxanne Wilder are discussing everything from world, national, and local issues to information from the unknown. And since Morgan's an attorney, there'll probably be a little something from the law. Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
No, it's not. It's just Morgan Streetman today.
That's
and
right.
Pat George.
Well, no. I wanted to say this, that you are flying the rocket ship solo today. I'm just the ticket taker. I put everybody on board through the tickets, but you are the pilot alone in that seat in that cockpit all by yourself.
Well, how come you're not on the intro, Pat George? You're an integral part of the show.
I talk enough around here.
I guess so. Yeah, you're on so many shows now.
Oh, I'm on everything. And
I heard you this morning, in fact.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I always enjoy listening to you.
That's a fun little show that we do in the morning, Beyond the Law.
You guys have fun.
Don't talk too much about the law.
Well, that's because it's named Beyond the Law. It's the law you already dealt with.
We're way out there. We're way beyond that. I didn't know that Roxanne was such a big sports fan that she stayed up and rah-rahed the whole Super Bowl. And
did she really?
She took a personal day so she could recoup.
Poor thing. I tell you what, she has to get up early, like you.
Oh, yeah, she gets up
early.
Get up
and get here early.
And she's a mama, so she needs at least...
She's got to get up early anyway.
All the time.
Well, you got to get up pretty early, beat us here to the news. I mean, we're really always staying right ahead of the news. And one of the things we wanted to is take a quick look back this week and talk some. And Pat, I was disappointed last week you didn't get to weigh in at all on the Covington Catholic High School controversy. But I wanted to just take a quick look back at that this week because I don't know if you've seen it, but the defamation letters have apparently gone out. Mm-hmm. And there's a video out there. I don't know if you've seen the video.
I have not. I see it right here.
Okay, you got to check the video out. I mean, the video is really cool. Now, this is a smart lawyer that Nick Sandmann's got named Lynn Wood. And Lynn Wood put this video together. And you can go out there and just search it. It's Nick Sandmann. And remember, it's Sandmann with two N's. The Truth in 15 minutes. And it's not quite 15 minutes, thankfully.
You can find it on YouTube.
Oh, you can find it on YouTube, yeah. And what it does, it breaks down that video, that 2-hour or so video that they had of the entire incident. And it shows you start to finish what happens. It shows you how the kids were milling over from the march. You know, it talks about the fact that I think this was like the, and I should have written this down, but maybe 47th or 48th Right to Life march that they've had. So this was a regular event. Now, this was the first Native American People's March that they've ever had there. Then they did choose to put that on the same day as the Right to Life March so that they could have them juxtaposed together.
Okay.
You know, essentially as both sides of the spectrum,
right.
Point and counterpoint.
Right.
So there was a little bit of antagonism there, I would say, from the Native American organizers to say, essentially, we're going to have a counter demonstration. But, I mean, it shows the whole thing from start to finish where the kids basically walk up. You've got the black Hebrew Israelites who are like we can be sometimes. They're equal opportunity offenders. They're just insulting everybody. I mean, they're insulting the Native Americans, and it shows that on the video.
Is this video censored?
It's a good question. I didn't watch it with those kind of eyes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. I mean, I know for sure that they say some pretty strong stuff. I don't know whether or not it would be considered to meet whatever the censors rules are.
So would this answer questions if you had questions, if you watched this video?
Oh, man, would it ever answer questions for you? It'll tell you exactly what happened.
Okay, good.
You know, and you see them, they're insulting the Indian group, and they're insulting the kids. Some of the kids come over and kind of are watching what's going on, and they're like, basically, saying, come on, kids, you want to step into the lion's den with us? We'll tear you up. And the kids turn around and go away. So anyway, it shows you that the Nathan Phillips, the American Indian elder, so-called tribal elder, who was a big liar, big liar about what happened that day. You remember he said that kid, Nick Sandmann, got in his face,
right? Which
he didn't. Nick Sandmann, by the way, is a very slight fellow. He's not a big guy. Although he was standing nose to nose with Phillips, that's because Phillips walked up to him when Sandmann was standing on the stairs.
And they don't show that on the regular.
No, they don't show any of it. So everybody just wanted to jump in with their preconceived notions. And what you have is a bunch of celebrities and a bunch of news people and a bunch of news outlets, including places like the New York Times and Maggie Haberman and others, who have all received these defamation letters, which essentially say they've got to correct or take down their statements, or they're going to be potentially liable for civil lawsuit for defamation. And, I mean, some of the other people, Elizabeth Warren apparently got one of these, the presidential candidate, because these kids are not public figures. So you can't just say anything you want. I mean, in defamation law, there's this concept that you can essentially speak more about public figures than you can about private figures. So you can get away with saying more about a Hillary Clinton or a Donald Trump than you can about somebody who's not a public figure. And if you remember the Bubba the Love Sponge and Todd Schnitt trial, that was kind of what that whole thing was about.
Sure.
Was whether or not Todd Schnitt's wife was in fact a public figure who could be subjected to Bubba the Love Sponge's negativity on air.
Right.
Remember, that was a big thing that turned on. So if you're a public figure, you have to be willing to take a lot more heat than if you're a private figure. These kids obviously are not public figures. One, they're not even adults. But two, they weren't there demonstrating in some kind of a position where they were trying to be advocates. They were simply participating. So it's not as though they were the leaders or they were on television or anything like that. The only reason we have them on video is because someone took out their cell phone and started recording the incident.
I was going to say that. This had to be a lot of work for the attorney to put this together, to grab all this, but it's available. Everybody has their phone. There could have probably been 50 to 100 different versions of this.
Yeah.
That's what you have to go after.
A lot of different angles. That's exactly right. Somebody's got to kind of pull those all together. You got to sync it all up. I mean, you know some of that from audio and video production. It was a big job. I'm sure they hired a third-party specialist. I'm sure the attorney himself was not the one actually doing the video editing, although you never know.
This could be a new trend that people start doing it whenever they get in trouble or something happens. And
if you're a cutting edge, if you're a high-end attorney and you're doing big cases, video, they call them video settlement, demonstrations and things like that. I mean, that's a big deal in the practice of law. So, I mean, they've got some very high-end legal representation who's doing all the right things for them, the Covington Catholic High School kids doing all the right things for them to potentially put them into a position to have a chance to win these kind of cases. Because defamation cases are hard to win to begin with.
I see a new business right here.
What's that?
Hire about 15 to 20 people to go to a big event like that, the potential where it could get out of control. Have everybody film. They're already on your team. They're already working for you. Have them filming from every angle.
Uh-huh.
You know, they're not those big cameras, so people don't know who's filming what.
Right.
Just bring it back and say, okay, here's what really happened. And you already have it.
Yeah, right.
New business.
And then maybe you sell it to the lawyers for their video.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Well, you never know. I mean, if you think of that from a distributed perspective and not from a centralized perspective, you may be onto something there. How could people pull together and aggregate videos and be paid for them? You know, if you were at this event, you took some video, we'll pay you some amount of money to submit your video to the Hive or whatever they want to call it, and all the videos get submitted in there, and then they get combined. I don't know.
Hey, what's this story about Lakeland?
Did you know, Pat George, Lakeland is scheduled to be the #1 residential real estate market in the whole country this year?
Absolutely not.
And we finally, in Tampa Bay, have cracked into the top 10 for real estate investors, particularly out-of-area real estate investors, are really finding that Tampa Bay is got a lot of the qualities that they're looking for in terms of finding a place to invest. And these are people from, the coast and the big cities, Northeast and stuff. And they're used to paying a lot of taxes up there. And particularly now that they can't deduct those from their federal income taxes, some of them are looking for other places to establish a base of operations, including the state of Florida, where they might want to have a homestead, which, is heavily protected, and other things. So the trends are really looking very good. Now, of course, these trends and things, the future will be whatever the future will be. We don't know what the future is going to hold this year, and I think there are a lot of things that could potentially affect the real estate market. But that being said, it does look like if everything keeps going as expected, that Tampa Bay and Lakeland in particular are going to be some very, very hot real estate markets this year.
Why Lakeland? Why?
I just think have you been over to Lakeland, spent much time over there?
Yeah, that's still kind of rural in parts.
It's kind of rural, so there's plenty of land. Now, there's good industry over there with Publix and a lot of warehousing industries and other things. There's high-quality people there for the workforces because of the whole Publix infrastructure that's built up over there. And the housing prices are still relatively affordable relative to what you could make over there for making a living. So I think in terms of what you can earn and what you can buy, it is a very attractive place for this area. And there's some really nice people over there. And again, I just think that Publix infrastructure has really built up a strong group of professionals and computer science people and other kinds of people over there, logistics people, warehouse people, management trainers, everything, that Lakeland is actually a pretty strong place to look at moving if you've got a big business like a Publix or like an Amazon. And so I think we're going to continue to see those businesses flock to this area because we do have some high-quality people here, and it's really kind of undiscovered as compared to other areas. We're going to tell you about the biggest cathedral in the Middle East when we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Here's a story I don't know if you heard last month. Now, first of all, do you know that the Coptics and the Orthodox, they have their Christmas actually in January? Did we talk about that?
No.
Okay, isn't that interesting? It's not when the, quote-unquote traditional Christmas is, but it's at the beginning of January. But anyway, they opened up a new cathedral in Cairo, in Egypt, just in time for the Coptic Christmas. Again, so that would have been first week of January, and it's called the Cathedral of the Nativity. Now, it is the largest cathedral now in the Middle East, and one of the reasons we wanted to tell you about that, we were trying to work that in a few weeks ago when we were talking about that 60 Minutes interview with the Egyptian president, which was kind of an ambush interview to a degree. Even Scott Pelley admitted that. They really didn't think he was going to give him an interview, and they kind of went on the attack on President el-Sisi, claiming that he had, murdered journalists and things like that. Meanwhile, they were whitewashing the Muslim Brotherhood at the same time on 60 Minutes. But the reason I wanted to point this out to you is President el-Sisi actually considers himself and styles himself as a defender of religious minorities. Now, he doesn't claim to be a Christian per se, but he does believe that the Christians in Egypt, who make up about 10% of the population there, they need to be protected.
Million.
Huh?
100 million.
Yeah. They need to be protected in Egypt. So, there's a lot of people in Egypt that are Christians, and it has not been widely reported, but there are hundreds of millions of Christians across the world who are under major persecution. It literally goes into the hundreds of millions, and the media never reports on it because, in their minds, the truth is it's not important. It's not important that Christians are facing persecution. But while you've got our domestic media telling us on 60 Minutes that President el-Sisi is a bad guy, all we have to do is look at his actions, which is that he actually attended this initial mass, the first mass they ever had at this cathedral for Coptic Christmas, Christmas Eve. He attended that, and he plans to support this and provide security for this cathedral in Cairo, and he wants to protect Christians. And in my book, I think that's pretty honorable. I think that's a good thing. I don't know why 60 Minutes would want to slander a guy like that when they've got the Muslim Brotherhood, who they seem to think is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, here's another story for you that'll get you a little bit fired up. Now, this is a couple of stories about Antifa, one of our least favorite groups. And I don't think you saw this one, Pat George.
I didn't. When I read this, I said, what?
Yeah, this didn't make the news, did it?
No.
This happened in Eugene, Oregon at a kid's middle school. A local Antifa leader came to the middle school to pick up his daughter. And there was an issue there because he had tried to essentially wrest custody of his daughter from his ex-wife. So he was trying to enroll her in a school. Under the court order, the wife was the one who had the rights to determine what school the daughter went to. So the husband was in the wrong for doing this, and that's where the police were kind of questioning him at the beginning. And essentially, sir, you what are you doing here, etc. Now, I want to point out the fact he's got a shirt on. Do you know what his shirt says? His shirt says, "Smash the patriarchy and chill." Smash the patriarchy and chill. So think about that one for a little while. This is a 30-year-old guy. He's an Army veteran. He's got a couple of daughters. He's obviously got some mental issues because he showed up at his daughter's middle school with a fully loaded, and I mean fully loaded, 18 rounds in the magazine and 1 round in the chamber. So he was locked, loaded, and ready to go. He showed up with a 9mm pistol.
That wasn't going to end well.
Well, you can't take a firearm to a kid's school. That's not allowed. And why in the world would you need it? So anyway, needless to say, while the police are questioning him and he's not wanting to answer any of the questions and getting combative, they begin to place him under arrest, as you would do with somebody who came to a child's school and became kind of a little bit crazy and combative. Well, as soon as they start trying to place him under arrest, he starts kind of backing up. And I don't know, did you see the video, Pat? Did you get to watch it yet? You got to watch it, man.
Pull that up.
He pulls the gun out of his pocket. You can see this guy fires 2 shots at these cops. And finally, as they're wrestling with him on the ground, one of the police officers shoots him in the head. You don't see that exactly, but you get the point, by the way, of what happened. But you don't actually see the gunshot to the head. But you can't blame the guy. Now, of course, meanwhile, in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon, they had protests and everything else about the cops being murderers and everything else, which they clearly are not. This guy pulls a gun on the police officer at a school where he's not even supposed to have a gun. He fires twice. They had to use deadly force. They had to take this guy out. And this is an Antifa leader. These are the people who at 30 years old are walking around, and because they don't believe in anything, they don't believe in civil society, they don't believe in rules that apply to them, they're taking guns to your kids' schools. Now, not all of them, obviously, but those are the quality of people that we're dealing with.
And what do they call these guys that go to court? They're
like guardian ad litems?
No, not that. They say they don't have to follow our rules when they go into court.
Oh, sovereign citizens.
There we go. Is that
that's
same?
That's a different piece of the crazy pie.
Okay.
That's a totally different piece from the Antifa piece.
Okay.
But they do have some similarities. What you're keying into there is maybe Antifa is the new sovereign citizens. It's the new, Waco compound. It's going to be some Antifa place. And I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, Pat George, because the Antifa folks do have a little bit of a different style to them. They're more of the communist, red baiting type. Now, one of the things that nobody talked about here in the U.S. that I saw was that Antifa in Europe actually participated, again, last month in an attempted political assassination. And I showed you the picture before the show of the poor guy. I mean, it's hard to describe.
Gruesome, right?
It's gruesome.
Yes.
Gruesome is a good word for it.
And he was still alive.
And he's alive as far, and I checked up on him this morning, and he's recovering. But I mean, you talk about splitting somebody's head wide open. They split this guy's head wide open. Now, they said they attacked him with some pieces of wood and stuff. It looks to me like they hit him with a bike lock. And we've seen those attacks.
What did
here.
he do so bad?
Huh?
What did he do so bad?
Well, he didn't do anything, right? He's just a politician. He's a member of parliament for a political party in Germany that they call fascist. Now, it's the Alternative for Deutschland, or the AfD party, and according to Antifa, those folks are Nazi fascists, but they're not actually Nazi fascists. So words mean things, and we need to look and see. They're basically pro Germany first and anti-illegal immigration. And, of course, nowadays, those positions are called racist and fascist and other things, even though they don't actually fit the definition, because everything has become propagandized and the media is trying to get you to think about things in a certain context that doesn't align with reality. And this is really spreading. I mean, over in Germany, do you know that, the attacks against these AfD politicians have literally been skyrocketing? The first 2014, the first year the party was around, there were 4. 2015, 76. 2016, 464. 2017, almost 700 attacks. Now, we haven't got the numbers yet for 2018, but you better believe it's going to be that or probably double. Right. That's it. And then what's going to happen this year? And this is crazy, folks. I mean, this widespread acceptance of political violence is absolutely mystifying to me. You cannot have a civil society where the way that we communicate with each other and we determine what our politics and civics are is through violence. That's not going to work. Anyway, I wanted to call that to people's attention because that's something you won't see on the news over here. We got a couple of key examples of who these Antifa folks actually are, and you need to know about it because the media is going to tell you a different story, just like they tell you a different story about the Muslim Brotherhood, and they try to tell you a different story about Democrats. But now we're seeing more and more of the truth. The Democrats, they need to change their name to the Demo KKK rats, the Democrats with a KKK instead of a C, because we got this Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, and boy, this guy must think he's got 9 lives. But I'm going to tell you what.
They're running out quickly.
They're running out real quickly because life number 1 was, oh, yeah, it's me in the photo, and that was terrible, and it was racist. And then lives number 2 through 8 have been, oh, that's not me. Somebody just randomly put a photo on my yearbook page that isn't me. And did you see they've already found another photo of a guy in the same yearbook who has the pants on of the guy who was in blackface. Oh. And he's standing next to Northam. So you know what that means. Right. Northam's probably the guy in the KKK hat or hood. Can you believe that?
Oh,
I mean, now look. I mean, this is in the 80s in the Deep South, and there was a lot of things like this going on. But, even then, I think, you should have known that this was in bad taste.
Yes.
And, I mean, you certainly wouldn't put this, if you had any political aspirations whatsoever, would you put this as one of your 4 yearbook photos? A picture of your buddy in blackface and you in a KKK hood? But just remember, folks, those are the Democrats. They want to say the Republicans are racist, but just look at whose actions are actually racist, and it's the Democrats. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We're charging through the news for you today. And something that's going to be coming up this week is the delayed State of the Union address, which is supposed to happen tomorrow night.
You can't wait for that either.
Well, you know that. Now, it's interesting because I went back and looked at some of the speeches that President Trump has given recently. And, he's just recently given some speeches on the border issue. And if you remember, some of these were pretty moving. There's one in particular I want to hearken back to, and we're going to play now.
This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart and a crisis of the soul. Last month, 20,000 migrant children were illegally brought into the United States, a dramatic increase. These children are used as human pawns by vicious coyotes and ruthless gangs. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted on the dangerous trek up through Mexico. Women and children are the biggest victims, by far, of our broken system. This is the tragic reality of illegal immigration on our southern border. This is the cycle of human suffering that I am determined to end.
Now, the reason I wanted to play that for you is because he says he is determined to end it. He shows a full understanding of the crisis, and he's determined to end it. So I don't think we should believe that he is just going to drop this at this point. So I think you were asking me earlier, what's going to happen in the State of the Union? Is Nancy Pelosi going to be there? Well, who knows? I mean, maybe she'll really show her rear end and not come. But it's hard for me to even imagine she doesn't come. Well, then is the president going to declare a state of emergency at the border and that he's going to have the military move in and erect the border wall or barrier, the border barrier, as I guess we'll call it now? I think that's got to be what's going to happen there, only because when you look at his past speech, he says he's absolutely determined to end this, and there's no indication in his past that he doesn't understand how serious of an issue this is. So what options does he have left? Is he going to shut the government down again?
I don't know, but I know with Pelosi better be there because a big topic on tomorrow night's going to be unity.
Yeah,
she's not there.
There's not much unity, is there? Unity. I mean, even if she is there, I don't think there's going to be much unity.
She's not going to probably be paying a lot of attention. She'll just be making the faces. And
Right.
the camera's going to be on her a lot.
Oh, you know that? Well, they're trying to make her essentially like a what they would call in the UK a shadow president, or the person who matches up with the president from the other party, kind of like what Obama wanted to be when he left office, and may well still be operating as. I mean, he's certainly dropped off the radar, but he's still living in D.C. He's got that big walled-in fortress. And he added a wall. Remember, he didn't just have a wall when he moved in. They actually added a big wall around his house in D.C., and you're not even allowed to walk onto his street in D.C.
Don't use that word wall. Barrier.
Okay, they added a large barrier,
People
right?
accept that better.
But it's not okay for anybody else to do it. Now, speaking of other people, now here's the one you're going to hear from, and this is part of the reason you got to think Trump is going to do something major on the border, because the Democrats have already selected their person to respond to the State of the Union. And who did they pick other than loser Stacey Abrams? And I don't mean that she's a loser as a person. I just mean she ran for Georgia governor and didn't win. She didn't win her election. So she's not right now. She doesn't actually have a position, but she's the one they picked to respond. And I think I know why. Because do you remember she gave a speech before the elections? We're going back to September or so, maybe October of last year, and she talked about how there was going to be a blue wave. Do you remember that speech, Pat George? We played it here on the air. And folks, I want you to listen real carefully to it again.
But the thing of it is, the blue wave is African American. Yeah! It's white, it's Latino, it's Asian Pacific Islander. Yes! It is disabled. It is differently abled. Yes. It is LGBTQ. Yes. It is law enforcement. Yes. It is veterans. Yes. It is made up of those who've been told that they are not worthy of being here. Yes. It is comprised of those who are documented and undocumented. Yes.
Ooh, I think there's the key. It's made up of those who are told they're not worthy of being here and have documented.
The blue wave is made up of those who've been told that they are not worthy of being here. Yes. It is comprised of those who are documented and undocumented. Yes.
Okay, so that's it. The blue wave involves those who are documented and undocumented. So that means, because remember, the blue wave was all about voting for Democrats. So that means that the people who are undocumented are supposed to be voting for Democrats. And that's why we want to keep our borders open in this country. That's reading between the lines there, folks, as to why the Democrats are supporting the open borders policy and so against the Trump policies of building a border barrier.
But she's going to have a lot to say in that blue wave, because before her comes the red, white, and blue wave.
That's right. Well, it's going to be something. I expect we'll see one of the shorter State of the Unions that we've seen, because if you haven't noticed a pattern, President Trump in his prepared remarks has gotten very, very tight. He gives short, punchy speeches. He gets to the point, and he gets out of there. And so I think we'll see a shorter State of the Union maybe than what we're used to in the past, but that's just a random prediction. Who knows what will actually happen? And speaking of random predictions, this is something we don't know what's going to happen down in Venezuela, but we promised folks we're going to tell them a little something about it, so we better do some of that, Pat George.
It's scary down there now, right?
Well, it is, but we don't have very good sources of information either. It does seem like, as we've discussed on the show, that what we're seeing there is the process of, and I'm just going to say it's an American directed coup of Nicolas Maduro. Now, look, I'm not a fool. I don't necessarily believe that Maduro is legitimately elected president. I think he probably has the support of about 30% of the population, the Chavistas down there. But, the truth of the matter is that no politician in Venezuela has more than about 30% support. So nobody's carrying a majority of support in that country. And he definitely has support among the Reds, among the communists that brought Chavez to power. So he currently, at least by all accounts other than the West now, is the sitting president of Venezuela. And, of course, now we've had this Juan Guaido guy come in and be made president by the parliament down there. And, of course, I think a bunch of European countries. We had Spain, the UK, Germany, and France just today or yesterday recognize Juan Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela. But the biggest problem we have is what really matters is who the Venezuelans think is the legitimate president.
That was going to be my question. Who do they want?
Well, and that's what we're not exactly seeing, because I can tell you, and I didn't get to say this, I don't think, on the air, but we saw those news stories a few weeks ago about hundreds of thousands of people are in the streets in Caracas. And I'll tell you, Pat George, I looked really hard at all those photos. I didn't find a single photo depicting hundreds of thousands of people. I found a couple of photos depicting tens of thousands of people at most, but I didn't find any with hundreds of thousands of people in it. So maybe I missed something. Maybe the photos were intentionally taken very closely. But, normally when they take a close-up photo, it's because they don't have a huge crowd. And I think if you look real hard at some of those photos, you'll see what I'm talking about. The crowds are nowhere near as big as what the propaganda was saying that they were. So now I'm thinking of other times when we've gone in and done popular quote-unquote regime changes in other countries and how we've pulled those off. And it's all about perception.
Not a very good track record in some of the history of that.
God, I mean, when are we ever going to learn that when we go and we do these things, that it's like swinging the pendulum, and that pendulum just keeps swinging for generations, and we wind up with things like the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and we wind up with other problems when we try to go in there and in a very heavy-handed way take out somebody's leaders. I feel like we have got to learn a better way, because insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And seeing as how this continually fails us and costs us more money, remember how easy it was supposed to be to go into Iraq and change the regimes? They were going to greet us with flowers. We were probably only going to be there 6 weeks, Bill Kristol said. None of that came true. We're still there. We're still there. It's been 15 years. We're still in Afghanistan. We can't get out of these places once we go there. And are they getting better or worse? Because now they're telling us we can't leave or things will get a lot worse.
And then we talk about Syria, where we pulled out of Syria pretty much. But if we'll go right back in there.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, you can see poor Trump is pretty easy to talk back into things, because apparently he's already been talking about sending troops down to Colombia to deal with Venezuela. And we saw some of that on John Bolton's notepad that he rather inelegantly showed to the press. But what I wanted to point out, because we got to get to this part about Iran. Iran in December said that they're going to actually send destroyers over to Venezuela to support Venezuela. And they said they're going to send their new Sahand destroyer, which is like top of the line for them. They finally have the ability now to fire torpedoes from their destroyer. I mean, oh my goodness. And they can launch a helicopter from it. I mean, they're really moving into the 20th century. I mean, you got to watch these Iranians now.
Soon they'll get an aircraft carrier.
But in reality, perhaps, for all I know, it's just one of those remote controlled things, kind of like their stealth bomber that they had. It was just a remote controlled, fake.
But this is close to home.
But this is close to home. And what you can see is the powers, the anti-U.S. powers of the world, including Russia, Iran, and others, are lining up to try and assist Venezuela, because they're essentially viewing these things like dominoes to fall. It's kind of like the reverse, how we used to have a policy of containment against the communists. And so we would go fight wars in places like Vietnam to keep the communists from expanding. Well, kind of in the same way now, I think you've got the anti-U.S. conglomerate of folks are meeting the U.S. at every point the U.S. is trying to do stuff. So, you've got reports of Iran sending ships down to Venezuela. Also, we heard last week about 400 Russian special forces are apparently going to Venezuela. And I was thinking, Russia is really building a cottage industry and supporting client states like Syria from U.S., attempted U.S. overthrow. And they're going to have a pretty good track record of it, particularly if they hold Venezuela. So the key on Venezuela, the key to everything is watch the military. And until the military moves against Maduro, which could happen at any point, but until the military does that, I think we've got zero chance of overthrowing Maduro peacefully. Now, could we go to war with Venezuela and assassinate him? Everything else? Yeah, I suppose we could pull all that off. I mean, I think that would not be really probably the right thing to do and very smart. I think we'd have some unintended consequences that we didn't expect that would come from that, but we could do it. But in terms of, is this coup going to work, the only way the coup that we've set up down there is going to work is if we get the military to actually turn. And so far we haven't seen that. And it's the type of thing, Pat George, coups don't get better with age. If the faster they can succeed, the better they are. Right. They need to get it over with quickly. If this drags on to, what are we now, like 2 weeks now?
At least.
If it continues to drag on, it's getting less and less likely that it's going to work. Just like what happened in Syria, where it's drug on for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years now. Probably not 10, but it's drug on for a long time in Syria, and it's never going to work. And we're finally admitting we're not going to get Assad out at this time. Well, we didn't get to tell you about the Georgia man who was arrested for trying to launch an anti-tank missile at the White House, but we do have some great out there stories about private information gathering when we come back. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. It's time to go out there today, and we've got a trio of stories for you that I hope you're going to see the logic behind selecting the three, because I see it, and I'm hoping you catch me on this. So the first story we wanted to tell you about, do you know that they're going to have the first private spacecraft ever is going to land on the moon, supposedly this month?
Not surprised. We should have done it last couple of weeks when the moon was closer.
That's right. When it was closer and when it was red, we could have easily hit it. It's an obvious target. Just hit the bullseye right up there in the middle of the sky.
And especially for a private company.
But they're running a little bit behind. Let's face it. I mean, this company began in 2011, so it began like 8 years ago for purposes of trying to win the Google Lunar X Prize, which was a $30 million prize that was to go to the company who first landed successfully on the moon, and this is private company. Now, that contest, though, ended in December of last year without a winner. So nobody won that one, but nevertheless, this company that was trying to compete in it called Space.il, which is an Israeli company, they were so far along that they're figuring they're just going to keep going because they built the lander, they're ready to launch it, and it's an interestingly sized thing. It's about 6 feet wide and about 4 feet high, so like kind of a large moving box size, and it weighs about 350 pounds. Now, they're going to catch a ride on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, but once they get up into orbit, then they can just launch on to the moon from their launch point in orbit. And they're going to land on the moon. It's an interesting vehicle because it's not a traditional vehicle that it moves around on wheels. It's actually kind of hops around. So it's a new design and a new technology that they've gone with. But that is supposed to happen this month. It's called the Bereshit, which means in Hebrew, the beginning, which I thought was interesting. Now, second story we want to tell you about, and this is kind of in line with the first, is that we have had an absolute explosion in private satellites in orbit. I mean, it's unbelievable. And, of course, it's not like they tell us every time they're going to launch one. With all these private space flights going up, these, Falcon X, the SpaceX Falcon 9, flights and things going up, I mean, they're just constantly launching these little satellites. And the satellites are small. They're about the size of a shoebox.
I'm amazed they don't run into each other. There's so many up there now.
I know. Can you imagine the maps on that? If you ever look at the maps on that, It's amazing. We could see the sun.
Right.
But, of course, drawn to scale, everything becomes very small in space. But anyway, they've put about 300 shoebox-sized satellites up into orbit. These satellites weigh about 10 to 15 pounds. And they've got so many now. This is one company in particular called Planet Labs. It's got the 300 up there. They take a photograph of every square inch of Earth every single day. Every square inch of Earth every single day gets photographed.
Never get to see all of this.
They've got so many photographs, nobody can look at them.
Right.
They're going to have to develop these artificial intelligence algorithms to look at the photographs, to tell them whether or not something's changed in the photographs, to call it up for human, viewing, because there's too many to look at as a human.
And they say they can see something 4 inches in diameter.
That's right. I mean, think about it. They can read your license plates. They can see exactly what you're doing every day. Every day. Now, who owns that data? Who owns those photos? What if you're sunning naked in your backyard and you got a 10-foot fence and your neighbors can't see you and you don't even know the satellite saw you? And remember, what did you say was the smallest size it could see, Pat George?
4 inches in diameter.
4 inches. So, watch out.
It can see everything.
It can see everything, literally everything if you're sunbathing naked or dancing naked outside and burning a dollar bill for the solstice or whatever you're doing.
Right.
Whatever you're doing that you think is in private may not be in private. Somebody's got a photograph of it somewhere that you didn't consent to them taking.
Do any of these things have infrared so they can see heat?
Well, you better believe they do. They have all different kinds of satellite photographic measures. I mean, they can take different kinds of pictures depending on the satellite. So that's the next step, is what happens when they can see inside your house from a satellite through infrared or something. Right. I mean, these things are coming.
Invasion of privacy.
Huh?
Invasion of privacy.
Invasion of privacy. Well, who owns the data? I mean, who can do that? Is it your data? Do you own your own image? I mean, when you were talking about somebody taking pictures of you terrestrially, as long as you're not a public figure and you're in private, you do own your own image. And so, there's a lot of issues in terms of the privacy implications of some of this broad collection of data. And folks, if you think you're going to be protected by these private companies, you're not. And here's the last story of our trio, and we better make sure we get to this one before the music starts, but this is going to bring it all together, okay? And that is a story out there, again, didn't make big news, but I personally think it really should have. And that is a story that I think all the major wireless carriers in the U.S. currently sell your location data of your cell phone to private companies. Okay, do you understand what that means? They currently take the data that says where you are vis-a-vis your cell phone day in and day out, and they sell it to private companies. Now, what's happened once they sell it to private companies? Well, they've got agreements that say those private companies can't misuse it. And, of course, those private companies then resell the data to other private companies, and they've got agreements with those other private companies that can't be misused. But how many of you have ever heard of private companies always honoring their agreements? I mean, they just simply don't do it. We've seen Facebook, we've seen Google. They haven't honored their privacy policies in the past, and that's come to light. Well, guess what? These other private companies don't honor their contracts either. So they're getting a hold of your private data, and lo and behold, somehow it's making it into a totally private black market system. And do you know that for a fee of about $300, you can call a bounty hunter in this country and find out the exact location of just about anybody that you want to currently? I mean, the exact current location. So if I was looking for Pat George, say for instance, and I called up one of these bounty hunters, apparently the bounty hunter can access this location data and can send me a picture of a map that would show me that Pat George is sitting right here in the Beasley Media Group studios, right here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I would know exactly where you were. Now, that'd be very valuable if I was looking for you for purposes of a lawsuit or something else, or for any reason. And the question is, have you consented to that, Pat? Did you agree that the telecom companies could just sell your location data to bounty hunters?
I never would. I never thought they would, but they are, and I know. I did not consent.
It violates your privacy policy and everything else, but somehow it's happening. Now, I don't feel we were really able to do that last story full justice, because you need to understand, folks, what's being sold about you. One, the information that's being collected, and two, how it's being used for commercial purposes. And this is an article I want you to go out there and read. It's a motherboard article, and it's entitled T-Mobile, Sprint, and AT&T are selling consumers real-time location data, and it's falling into the wrong hands. And you can go and see where they actually bought the reporter's location data from a third party, from a bounty hunter, for $300.
So much for the game of hide and seek.
So much for the game of hide and seek. And what happens when they can plant one of those private satellites over your house and take all the pictures they want, and you don't even know what's going on? What happens then? Thanks for joining us, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard. And if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And don't forget to exercise your brain at least once a week.